All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to episode 3 of Anthony's A-List. This is actually Master Dan's episode. For those who don't know Master Dan is a career-long martial artist who is now in his 60s, I believe, right?
65.
65 has now picked up a musical instrument and has sang on his very first recording, and I'm super proud of him. He put in a ton of hard work, put in just tremendous amounts of work. And if there's anything I can say about you, Master Dan, is, you outwork everybody. I don't think there's any doubt about it, You absolutely outwork everybody.
Well, you have to when you don't have a lot of talent.
Oh my God, don't do that. He has a lot of talent. He's just making that up. But
self-depreciating too.
yeah, and so let's go ahead and start talking about this week's episode. This week we recorded Dreams by the Allman Brothers. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a little about yourself, Master Dan, and then why did you pick the song Dreams?
Well, again, I'm a career martial artist. Last 27 years, I've run probably the biggest school in South Tampa. And then last year, I ran into some health problems, and without getting viral pneumonia. Then there was the pandemic, and long story short, I didn't recover well, and I had to close my school. The good news is I've recovered, and so I'm spending a lot of time staying healthy by doing Taekwondo at my house with you, Anthony, and a few other people, and working on music.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I think you really said it. So why Dreams? So we talked a lot, and we talked a lot about like what songs you might want to record and what songs you really held special to you. And you actually brought this to me, and this was at a point where this was a very hard song on bass guitar, especially, right? Had a lot of very unique chord progressions that I wasn't expecting when I transcribed it. And I was like, Master Dan, this is going to be a difficult one. But you stuck through it and really learned the part. And I'm just curious, what made Dreams so special to you?
Well, I think everybody has a type of music that resonates with them. And way back, I'm talking, I think it was 1969. I was a young teenager, and a friend of mine who aspired to be a musician said, Danny, you gotta listen to this Almond Brothers album. It's their first album, and okay, come on over. And he played it, and there was the classic songs on there, if you're an Allman Brothers fan, like Whipping Post, Trouble No More. But then came the song Dreams. And it was one of those things that captured me to such an extent that I probably played it 50 times.
Wow, like the first time you heard it?
The first time I heard it.
Wow.
It was like I was like at a sleepover at his house, and I think I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning just playing it over and over again. That's how much it resonated with me. And I had never heard anything like it. You're a young person, and you hadn't really heard much of the Allman Brothers until I introduced you to them.
Yeah, I was familiar with them because I do a lot of study of music, right? And they're a huge like blues group. So like I definitely heard, like a lot of their stuff like Stormy Monday and whatnot, but and Whipping Post I've also heard. You introduced me to that one, but a lot of I knew who they were. I wasn't like really knee deep in their music. I definitely wasn't transcribing it, but I was very impressed when I was transcribing it because it had quite a few different chord progressions, but it still followed like a functional harmony sense,
Right.
meaning it was resolving down to the fifth each time. I'm not going to get into like a whole thing about this, but it had some elements that were functional, right? So I was like, oh, I recognize this from like classical music. Like I recognize this. This is a 2-5-1, but like it was done in their own way.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it definitely surprised me. And yeah, and I thought the recording was really cool. It had a jam band feel, but it also had like the feel of a lot of other genres out there, which was we are gonna vamp on like this one chord or this one idea, but the way the interplay of musicians were, it reminds me of the Doors, right, or
Sure.
a couple of other musical groups. Is the interplay of the musicians on what are we gonna do on this one chord? What's the drummer gonna do to push the bass guitarist that then push the rhythm guitarist that then changes the soloist that then changes how the drummer plays, right? like that ecosystem, right? They had that really down to a science, and they were finishing each other's sentences in a musical sense. And I thought that was really, really cool and very, very authentic to that time period. Yeah. So, Master Dan, I know you just kind of started bass guitar. So, how long you been playing bass guitar for?
Um, Maybe a year and a half.
A year and a half. And how long you been singing?
Probably about 4 weeks.
Oh, come on. You've been singing for longer than 4 weeks. Master Dan had his first vocal lesson about a year ago, so don't let him say that.
Yeah.
But this is very, very new to you, and I'm sure, as being an instructor for a long time and then being thrown into this world that's completely unfamiliar with you must have been a little jarring.
I would say so.
So what's it like to kind of be a new musician and really start just hitting the ground running? Like, can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah, well, if I can back up a little bit, when I had the commercial school and you were a student there with me, one of my instructors, I was asked to host an event for Vietnam Veterans Day, celebrating the end of the war, the 50th. So we had the space, and I said, sure, well, we'll do something, And I went to you because we had done one the year before. We played some background music, and it was, very nice. Well, as a hobby, which I always kept to myself, I'd always rearrange music. And I'd put some music on a CD in a player going down the road and say, well, what if we took out the guitars and added a trumpet? What if we took out the trumpet and added a guitar? And just rearranged it. And I always loved the song Find the Cost of Freedom by Stephen Stills, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. And I felt, I bet this song would be beautiful if it was played on a piano. Just take it away from its natural guitar element. So I actually put my idea into writing to you and said, would you consider doing this? I think you understand what I'm looking for. Would you consider running with it? And you pulled me aside and said, Master Dan, I think this is a really good idea, but there's one catch. Well, what's that? Well, you have to play the song with me. I'm like, well, I don't sing, I don't dance, I don't play guitar, so, you're going to be on your own. And you were holding all the cards. You want me to play it? So then I grabbed the guitar and we started practicing together, and I don't think it went all that well. And I said, I think I would feel better with a bass guitar, and that's how it got started. And so we did a little video, Find the Cost of Freedom, and that was my first attempt to play a song on bass guitar. You put together a nice simple bass line for me, and I thought you did a great job with the whole piano and the arrangement and the singing.
So those who don't know, we did that, and that was Vietnam's Veterans Day is actually in March, and that was March of last year. So that's right when the coronavirus kind of came into full effect, and we started having to go on shutdown. And at that point in time, you were too sick to actually, I believe, leave your house at the time, correct?
Correct. I had spent 2 weeks in the hospital on a respirator in intensive care, and I think they say due to my martial arts training, it was pretty tough, and I came home and was put in quarantine for months, and we actually recorded that song in 2 different locations. I did the bass line from my kitchen.
Okay, so Buzz, a lot of people are gonna hear that and be like, "What? How are you recording?" So what we did was, we actually had him record in his kitchen. But what we did is we had 2 different cell phones, and I believe the new home studio now is actually your iPhone, and we actually had him record it through a voice memo, or maybe it was in GarageBand. We actually had you go into mobile GarageBand. We actually had to record him. We put the phone next to the amp, right? And that way we got an audio signal. What I did with that is I then took that into, I believe at the time I was also mixing on GarageBand, did a real solid EQ curve to try and cut out anything that was really muddy or really intense. We gain staged it properly beforehand. I was on the phone with them explaining to that, so we had no clipping, and we just had a nice solid, although it was a little sounding, we had a nice solid sounding bass line, and that is actually the bass line you hear on the original recording. At that point in time, I didn't have like all the equipment I have set up, and that was actually one of the first songs I ever produced, and the whole thing was recorded, mixed, and mastered on an iPhone. I actually did the whole song, the whole recording, every single plugin, everything you hear was made specifically from an iPhone GarageBand. You know, the piano. You actually see it in the video. Right? If you actually look on the side of the piano, you can see all these wires and the whole setup and like an iPhone sitting there. And yeah, that was just one crazy experience, and that happened right at the start of the pandemic. And we were actually originally going to play that live, but
Right.
you know,
Right. Yeah, but
stuff happens.
Yeah, the pandemic forced us to cancel the event. The place that was hosting the event closed. I mean, and I think we recorded that 2 or 3 days after I got out of the hospital.
Yeah, you know, like 2 or 3 days out of the hospital. Really, I actually didn't know that. I didn't know it was that close.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know you had told me that you really, really wanted to plan this recording.
Sure.
And I was like, man, we gotta find a way. Yeah, we found a way. I still can't believe we pulled that off in some respects. That's probably one of the crazier ones I've ever pulled off. But yeah, so then that happened, and then we continued to do virtual lessons online. So the next question I kind of wanted to ask you is, you have a very prolific martial arts career. You know, not only have you been a teacher, but you've been a 2-time national champion in Taekwondo. You've coached multiple national champions and have been involved with multiple sports teams with Pan American champions and world champions, and you're just overall really know what you're talking about when it comes to martial arts, right? But, you know, I'm just curious about how maybe, you know, the discipline with martial arts and all of that stuff relates to you musically speaking with you practicing. Because I have quite a bit of students, but no one works as hard as you, Master Dan.
Well, okay. I would have to concur that, you know, self-discipline is a big part of martial arts. Self-discipline is a big part of who I am, and persisting. So when it came to playing the bass guitar, you know, I didn't feel like I was a natural music talent, and I felt that success would come from hard work. So I just made up my mind that if I'm going to be any good at this, I've got to do the work. And I did my best to do the work. And I always wanted to sing, and you know, one time I came over here for a guitar lesson, and you had a voice instructor here, and he said, "Oh, let's try messing with the voice." And let's just be honest, it didn't go over that well. I had never sang in my life, you know. Can you match pitch? And it didn't seem like I could.
Well, you're a lot better at it now, you know. I mean, obviously the first time you do something, it's like a
sure.
But we were just like,
I get that, you know. But I'm also perceptive enough to know that I didn't do too well. But I was taken in by the whole thing, and the nice young lady that was showing me drills. I had, you know, it was like a foreign language to me. I had never heard of these types of drills. So this is how a singer prepares their voice, etc., etc., etc. So I said, well, you know, I've got time, you know, and every time I jumped in my truck and went down the road, I would practice. And I started to get a sense that, oh, yeah, I'm understanding this some.
You know what's crazy is I never really realized it, but it's one of the funnier realizations I've made is I can't think of how many singers their practice space is just their car. You know, I've talked to so many singers, and it turns out like the place they practice in most is actually their car. And I think that's just one of the funnier things, you know, is that you don't have to be in a huge like place or like have a giant music room. Like a lot of people actually hone and create their talent in their car. Like Nick was talking about that when I had him on the podcast. Krista, who was your vocal instructor, talks about that all the time. Anna, who's my wife, who we'll have on the podcast soon, does the exact same thing. And I just always thought that was really fascinating of how many people practice in their cars.
You know, I think what happens is it's you have the time, and it's really a safe place. You know, you don't have to worry about driving people in your house crazy or
Right.
scaring the animals, and so it's a very, very safe place. And if you make a mistake, nobody hears you.
Gotcha. Yeah, I thought that was really good. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about like self-discipline in martial arts. And, if you want to be good at something, you got to put in the work, right? There's just
absolutely.
no shortcut.
You know, when I hooked up with you, all of a sudden I realized that, a childhood dream, like I will go all the way back to that moment where I heard Dreams by the Allman Brothers. And I said to myself, man, I'd love to be able to be musicians like these guys, And then, of course, the Doors, then the Beatles, and the Stones, and Led Zeppelin. But the Allman Brothers resonated with me the most. But if you understand any musical history, that era in time was gigantic, just start with the Beatles and everything that came from there. It changed the world. And I always had a hope that someday I could be a quality musician. And frankly, I tried guitar a couple times, electric guitar, and I had some instructors who really weren't that good and that patient, so I probably tried 5 times and gave up on it. And I was just always hoping that someday that it would happen, and then this time in my life, I'm older and I got more time, and I said, I'm just going for it.
Awesome, man. That's very inspiring, and I'm glad you really went for it,
Yeah.
You really put in everything you had into this. And like I said before, no one works harder than you, and that's one of the reasons why this works and why you become who you are on this record, that you put in the time. Anna's was your vocal coach for this performance here, and she's by no means easygoing on people.
Sure.
She will tell you how it is, and when you sang that one time, we were like, all right, it's ready for record.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a real testament to how fast you did it and how much how well it sounded.
Yeah. And when it comes to making this record, I had never in my life sang and heard playback.
Oh, yeah.
I had never heard it. So when I sang the song Dreams in our recording, I kind of walked out of the room without hearing too much playback. I've never heard myself sing to this day.
That's really funny. Yeah, I know a lot of people have that same feeling, you know what I mean? It's like the first time you listen to yourself sing back and you're like, oh my goodness, that's how I sound?
Yeah.
Because it's cognitive dissonance. This is actually something that they can document in psychology. It's actually like it's like a beautiful person will look at themselves in the mirror but think they look horrible.
Right.
Because it's like there's a cognitive dissonance between the reality of a situation and how you're perceiving it, right?
Sure.
And that happens all the time to vocalists, you know what I mean? And they, even the best vocalists in the world, if they miss one note, they're like, oh, that performance was horrible. I need to go ahead and throw this in the trash can and never listen to it again. But they miss all the amazing things that they did,
Yeah. Well, you asked the question about martial arts in relation to music. Here's one, probably the most predominant thing that drove me to keep going, especially with this vocal thing. As you can imagine, you're a skilled martial arts, almost ready to test for master. You know more than the student,
right?
By far. And a lot of times the student doesn't understand, and you might say, just do it because I said to do it. And as you're doing it, you might develop an understanding. But just do it anyway. Just have confidence in me. So that comes down to always listen to the coach. Listen to the coach. Have faith in your coach knows what you're doing. And that's the approach that I took, not only with my bass playing, but specifically with Anna and my vocal training. I know she knows how to sing. I know she's a good coach. So whatever she said to do, I tried to do it. Even though I was unsure of myself, didn't completely understand what we were doing, I just tried to follow her directions.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because especially in a sport like Taekwondo or MMA or any combat sport,
It's complex.
I mean, people really don't get it.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it is so dangerous. And
Absolutely.
the faith that you have to have in your coach that they are going to tell you the right things. I mean, it would be no different than like someone, going on like a military operation and we're like, all right, we got to take out one of the baddest dudes on the planet who has like an army. Like, let's figure out, and you have to execute every single step perfectly in time.
Right.
The coordinator has to be on the money. Because if
Absolutely.
he's not,
Well, I mean,
people
the person-
die,
yeah,
like if you make a mistake in an MMA fight, you get your arm broken. There's
Absolutely.
a difference in consequence.
Mhm.
If you miss a note on a gig, that's one thing. If you miss a note, right? If you make a mistake in an MMA or in a Taekwondo situation and your opponent can capitalize, that is a knockout and possibly the end of your career.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And people don't necessarily grasp how violent that sport is. I mean, I think people grasp how violent it is, but people don't understand the true element of danger.
Right.
Or people just don't respect it.
Yeah, I mean, a really big, let's just say, mistake or incorrect strategic movement is fight ending or career ending.
Yeah,
And
easily.
Taekwondo, mixed martial arts, boxing, you make a big mistake in the boxing ring, you're just going to get knocked out.
Yeah, and people, they want to see the knockout.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What's your phone? Is that my phone? Whose phone is it?
That's fine.
Oh, okay. That's okay. But yeah, I don't think people really understand it, and it's really can be really intense. But yeah. So the last thing I kind of wanted to ask you about, besides all the music stuff, is that you've also been like a small business owner for a really really long time.
Right.
You know what I mean? And a lot of musicians nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, you have to be kind of like a small business owner.
Yes.
You have to either teach, compose. Maybe you're a publisher, a composer, and a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And through all of that, and a live performer, and through like all of that, you amass enough income to where you can do music full time, right?
Right.
And for a lot of musicians nowadays, I'm sure there's some people listening to this podcast that maybe work at their day job now, but maybe want to start that side hustle or start working on something on the side that's going to eventually lead them to becoming a musician full time or a small business owner. So let's just pretend like someone listening to this is working in an office right now. What tips would you give them in order to finally break away from that office job, let's say 5 years from now, and possibly open up their own music school?
Well, and that's a loaded question because there's different parts of being a musician. Are you going to be a performer that goes out and gets paid to perform or own your own school? But one of the things that I've always emphasized in running a business, and I like to say I haven't held a job in 30 years because I've been self-employed.
Right.
But it's not easy to go out and make a living being a musician.
Everyone would do it, right? If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Who doesn't want to be a musician on some level? But it's hard to do. So what I think you have to do is figure out how you want to make a living. Like it's a combination of producing, writing material, combine it with music lessons, but so you don't end up starving. I think you have to keep your day job and spend a lot of time developing your music career simultaneously.
I couldn't agree with that more, and I think what you started off with originally too, with saying like, what kind of musician, like where are you going to be involved in the music industry, that's a self-awareness question,
Right.
and I think self-awareness isn't talked about enough, something I really try and double down on is my self-awareness. What am I good at and what makes me happy? Because you could have all the work ethic in the world, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But, if you don't have at least a little bit of natural affinity for something, you're probably not going to make it to the top of that area.
You're not.
You're just not, right? So we all have our natural ability and our natural things that we can just do really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So what are you good at? And it really reminds me of a fighter, right? Like we talked about fighting, right? What's the most important element of a fighter? Be honest with what you're good at.
Absolutely.
It's the exact same thing.
It's the exact same thing with music. You have to ask yourself, what am I good at? What do I like doing that's going to make me happy but bring value to a community?
Yeah. I'm in the complete same boat.
Because you can't, if you just want to bang on drums, who cares,
Yeah.
And I'm not putting drummers down. But if you just want to make noise and have a good time, it's nothing. Then you have to be honest with your situation. How much money in this economic environment can I make doing what I'm really good at? And be honest with yourself on that.
Yeah, and do you have the discipline to stay within your means?
Yes.
That's another really big one that I don't think is talked about enough. Do you have the discipline to, coronavirus hits, I lost $5,000 of income. Did I have the discipline over the past 10 years when we have live income to save so that now when this happens, I'm not, completely, have to now go struggle and find a job somewhere else, right? And in that time, it's like putting your life in danger, especially if you're, an older person during this last year, you know what I mean? So a lot of the core elements that I find in Taekwondo has really transitioned to my adult life too. Discipline, being disciplined with content, setting this kind of stuff up, trying to get it done, right? Having the discipline to try and create something new every single week. Because, you can always easily say, I don't want to do this, you know what I mean? Or I don't feel like doing this today, right? And there'll always be like those days, right? Where like, maybe you don't want to train, you know what I mean? But like, you're never going to get good unless you do something consistently every single day.
Every single day. Yeah, it's not, if you're thinking it 2 or 3 times a week, you're wasting your time and everybody else's.
You know what I mean? And then, so you have to be super disciplined. You have to be honest with yourself. And that's one of the biggest things I learned with martial arts. You have to be honest with what you are good at.
Absolutely.
Because you're just not going to win doing someone else's strategy. Because it's not you.
Right.
It's not you, Roger Federer has the greatest forehand in the world. It doesn't mean that I can now go out and be a professional tennis player because I watched an autobiography on it.
Right. Right. But, just getting back to Taekwondo, and maybe if I can create a pointer for aspiring people, musicians who want to do a career in music, I had a Taekwondo school. I taught children and teenagers and adults. But that's a hard way to make a living. You have to have hundreds of students, and that's very challenging. But I had a money-making entity, which was after-school care, where we picked up kids from school in our own vehicles and brought them home. Well, that was a weekly tuition as opposed to a monthly tuition. So that allowed us to maintain a building and have a Taekwondo school, so I could pursue my passion. I know many Taekwondo school owners who don't want to take that route, but they have a day job, and then they open their full-blown Taekwondo school at 4 in the afternoon because they work from 7 to 3.
Yeah.
So and then some of them get to a point where they grow so big that they can walk away from their day job. But you need that financial security so you're not panicking. If you're panicking, you can't create.
Yeah, you can't create. You can't create when you're in a grind. Like, oh man, I gotta write the world's greatest song tomorrow, or else I'm going to.
You can't create if you're in a panic.
Right.
So it's so if you aspire to do something like this, forget 40 hours a week. You got to be thinking 60, 70, 80. But the many hours that you spend on music, hopefully you're enjoying it.
Yeah,
and having a great time with it. And I can't imagine anything better than being a musician, getting home from work and maybe having a little dinner, relaxing a little bit, and say, boy, I'm going to go to work and work on writing my new song or playing my piano or working my vocals or taking my piano lesson, whatever it is. And I don't really see how it gets too much better than that, because you get to pursue your passion.
Yeah, there's something to that. Like when you're on like the road and you know like the road's gonna lead to somewhere nice, but
Absolutely.
it's just staying on the road and staying consistent. You know what I
Right.
mean? And it's tough. You know, like there's gonna obviously be days. You know, you could be the most famous musician, the world's most dedicated. There's just gonna be days where you feel tired or feel
Absolutely.
like you don't want to do this. But even on those days, and this comes back to the world's greatest trainers, right, and the world's greatest martial artists. They don't take a day off, even when
Right.
they really feel tired. Maybe once in a great while.
Right.
But the reality is that if we actually like stepped into their lives and for a whole year shadowed them,
Yeah.
we would just be flabbergasted
Yeah, by
on how much time is actually spent
Right.
doing the work.
Absolutely.
And
And
yeah,
then when they get on stage, they make it look so easy.
exactly.
And
Or whatever their profession is. It doesn't have to be that. It could be like an Olympic champion.
Absolutely.
Like the person that's double takedowning the world's greatest at the moment, right, and is making it look easy and gets a gold medal, they're so far ahead because they've just put in sheer amount of hours and are at a physical level that is just unmatched because of their work ethic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just no other answer to it.
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Well, now I don't have too much else to say. Do you have any parting thoughts or anything you'd want to say to anyone listening here?
Well, maybe just briefly sum up what I said. If you're interested in music, playing music, singing, get started and do the work.
Yeah, get started and do the work.
And hopefully I'm a living example of that, because again, I don't feel like I'm a natural talent, but if you have some talent and you put in the work, you're going to be just fine.
All right, I think that's really well put. All right, Master Dan, I think that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all next week. That one went way better than the first one.
Yeah.